Welcome and thank you all who came today for the Candidates Forum. We at Conejo Council PTA feel it is very important to sponsor a program like this to help our community meet the candidates who are running for the school district board. I would like to start off, and it's my pleasure, to introduce our moderator for today's event, Attorney Selena Brandt, Legal Associate for the Center for Estate and Gift Planning at Pepperdine University. At the Pepperdine School of Law, she teaches advanced litigation writing and previously served as Assistant Dean for Career Development and taught legal research and writing. Selena was a tax associate for Latham and Watkins LLP in Los Angeles and Costa Mesa, working with corporations, partnerships, limited liability corporations, and charitable organizations, as well as individual investors. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in finance from Oregon State University and her Juris Doctorate at the Pepperdine School of Law, where she served as editor-in-chief of the Pepperdine Law Review and graduated first in her class of 1992. I'd like to introduce to you Ms. Selena Brandt.
Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I expect some more people will be coming in this afternoon after they finish up their brunch, but we'll go ahead and get started. And I'll start today by explaining the purpose and schedule for the Candidates Forum today. The forum will feature several opportunities to hear the ideas and views of the 7 candidates for the 3 open seats on the Conejo Valley Unified School District Board of Education. Here is a brief explanation of the format and rules we'll be following for today's forum. First, each candidate will give a 1-minute opening statement. The candidates will then be asked 2 pre-selected questions. They will have 1 minute to answer each of these questions. Candidates will then field questions from the audience on the question cards that those of you in the audience will have submitted. We have runners here today for that purpose. And if you need additional cards, you can feel free to raise your hand and someone will come and supply them to you. Each question will be asked of all the candidates. They will have 1 minute to answer these questions as well. For efficiency in the process and to keep things moving along, there will be no interaction between the audience and the candidates. Last but not least, each candidate will give a 1-minute closing statement. And after all the candidates have given all of their opening statements, I will then ask the 2 pre-selected questions that were chosen by the Conejo Council PTA from questions suggested by members of the community in advance of the forum. The order in which candidates respond to each question was determined prior to the forum, and we'll make sure that a different candidate starts each question so that each one has an opportunity to go first and each one has an opportunity to go last to make it fair. And a reminder to the audience, for those of you wishing to ask questions of the candidates, we do have the index cards available for you. And again, the runners are available to bring you index cards. Just raise your hand if you need some. Or if you run out and you just have a lot of questions, we'll bring you some more cards. All right, we're going to go ahead and begin the forum. And first, I'm pleased to introduce the candidates. I'll go through them in alphabetical order, and then we'll have the first one start. So our candidates today are Mr. John Anderson, yes, Mr. Tony Doles. If I pronounce anything incorrectly, please let me know. Mr. David Fox, Mr. Bill Gorbach, all right, Mrs. Pat Phelps, and Mr. Brian Sullivan, and I think I missed Mr. Mike Dunn there in the middle. We don't want to leave you out. Okay, we'll make sure that we don't do that during the questions. All right, beginning in just a few moments, the candidates will start their opening statements. I will call on them individually, and then they will begin. All right, and as I explained before the forum began, just a reminder for the candidates, our volunteer timekeeper will display a yellow 15-second card letting you know when you have 15 seconds remaining to speak in response to each question. And then the timekeeper will display a red stop card when your 1 minute is up. All right, the timekeeper is right here in the front row. Please be sure to complete your remarks at the 1-minute mark so that every candidate has a full opportunity to respond and so that we can cover as many questions as possible today. All right, beginning with the opening statements, we have Mr. Anderson, who will now start.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the PTA for sponsoring today's event. I want to sneak in a very quick thank you to my wife, Cindy, not just for her tolerance and support through the campaign, but we just celebrated our 37th wedding anniversary this week, so I'm very thankful for that support. We have 3 grown children. We've lived in Newberry Park for 29, almost 30 years. Our children are all graduates of Cypress Elementary, Sequoia Middle School, and Newberry Park High School. Go Panthers. I grew up in a small community in Central California. My father was a teacher. He taught at the local community college, music to be precise, and during the summers he taught in the elementary schools for summer school music programs. My wife and I have been members, or were members, of PTA and PFAs for the many years that our kids were in school, and we're even recipients of an award, and it was actually in 1992, but it was a Parent of the Year award for our contributions to the schools and to our broader community. I attended Occidental College here in Los Angeles, and my time's up. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Tony Doles.
Okay, my name is Tony Doles. Individual freedom, parental rights, and local control of schools is very important to me. Loss of individual freedom as a child in Cuba changed my life forever. I have vowed never to let this happen again. I lived in Sweden for many years, studied 2 years in Spain and 2 years in Norway, where I studied for my MBA. My wife is Danish. We have 2 children in our schools, a son, 13, and a daughter, 9. My wife and I own an international online business. I'm the only candidate with children in our schools. We have a growing Hispanic student population. I'm the only Hispanic candidate. We are experiencing changes in education. Power is flowing away from the parents and local schools to the state and federal government. I stand with families who demand a voice on their children's education.
Okay, Mr. Doles, we're going to stop at the 1-minute mark. Thank you. Well, I hope you can get your other comments in a little bit later. All right, Mr. Mike Dunn.
My name is Mike. My mission is to create prosperity. I strongly support our adult education program and career technical education program. I advocate student, local, business apprenticeships. We have a very good school district. We have some of the best teachers in California. But if you talk to parents who send their children to private, home, or charter schools, they will tell you we can do better. Our enrollment has declined 10% in the last 6 years, while alternative schools have waiting lists. Some candidates advocate, quote, that we stay the course, that we let the superintendent dominate the school district. If we stay the course, our enrollment will continue to decline. The way the Dominic Conti appeal was handled by our school board is evidence that we need new leadership. Mike is a voice for parents and taxpayers, including parents who send their children to private, home, and charter schools.
Thank you, Mike. All right, now, Mr. David Fox.
Good afternoon. I'm David Fox. The Acorn wrote in their editorial this week that this election is a referendum on the Conti matter. I respectfully disagree. Dominic Conti is a sophomore at Pepperdine, and he's doing fine. This election is about right now and the next 4 years. What kind of school board we wish to have. I bring more expertise, education, and experience in finance than the existing board and the rest of the slate combined. Our board needs this. The better we manage the money we have, the more our district can do, and the more resources can reach the classrooms. My other major focus is accountability. We need a board that holds the district accountable to the community, not one that acts as a rubber stamp. Accountability is the board's reason to exist. 4 of our current 5 members vote in lockstep and never fail to affirm the district. Then why even have a board? As Apple says, there's an app for that. There are candidates in this race who firmly support the status quo. This, more than anything else, is the choice that defines this election. I have over 20 years of experience serving on and working with effective and productive boards, and I wish to bring that experience to the service of the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Mr. Bill Gorback.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. I am running for the Conejo Valley Unified School District Governing Board out of gratitude and a career of experience. The gratitude is for my 4 children, who all went through Conejo Valley Unified School District schools successfully, then through UC Santa Barbara successfully because of the excellent academic foundation they received in this district. I have a career in public education. I have been an elementary, middle, and high school teacher, a counselor for students in kindergarten through 12th grade, special education counselor, and member of parent school councils. I have worked closely with nurses, office administrators, custodial and cafeteria staffs. I have taught and counseled in adult schools. My work with each stakeholder group has given me insight as to the effect every school board decision has on those members of the school community. My lifetime of public school experience enables me to give back to this district in a way that will benefit the district.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Gorback. All right. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
Thanks for coming and to PTA for organizing this event. A bit of my history. I have a BS degree in math from St. Lawrence University. I began my career as a software programmer and retired as a systems analyst. My husband Barry and I have 3 children, all graduates of Conejo schools, who went on to obtain postgraduate degrees and great jobs. We have lived in Thousand Oaks for 27 years. While my children were in school, I was involved with PFA and PTA at school, county, and state levels. When they left home, I remained involved with PTA in various positions on PTA Council and at school sites when needed. I'm a regular attendee at DAC. I believe these activities keep me informed on parent issues and accessible to school communities. To improve my board skills, I regularly attended the State Board Conference and county trainings. I hope today we will highlight successes and demonstrate how a board working as a team with district employees and administrators can build on the past to meet future challenges. I would like to remain on the team.
Thank you. And Mr. Brian Sullivan.
12 years ago, when my family and I decided to relocate to Southern California, we chose Conejo Valley because of the excellent schools. My 2 children are graduates of the district and went on to higher education, well prepared for schools like UCLA and DePaul. And my wife continues to work in a fulfilling job as a teacher at Ertz Magnet School. This school district is indeed great, but is not without its inevitable challenges and exciting opportunities, such as succession planning. Who is going to be our next generation of leaders? Declining enrollment, which is a direct result of demographic changes. Implementing Common Core, which should be thought of as a floor, not a ceiling. And the management of Measure I, the school bond, and ensuring our children have the best environment and resources to succeed. My love of the Conejo Valley, my executive healthcare experience, my extensive community involvement, my passion for education have led me to where I am with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. All right, we'll move on to the first of our 2 pre-selected questions. And as I said, the order will be slightly different. This time we will begin with Mr. Tony Doles, work down the line, and come back to this side of the table. All right, so the first question is, Mr. Doles, why do you want to be on the school board?
Well, I will answer in the following frame of reference. My father was a teacher and a union member. I'm a member of the PTA. I'm the only candidate with children in our schools, and I'm the only Hispanic candidate. Families with children in our school have asked me to run because they are just as committed as I am to giving our own children an excellent education.
Thank you, Mr. Doles. Now we have Mr. Mike Dunn.
Here's the first set of questions.
I seek re-election to the board. I've been on the board 10 years for 2 reasons. Number 1 is to create prosperity. My job is to make certain that every student in this district has the same opportunities that I had to grow up. That every student have the opportunity for an excellent education that is relevant to the needs of employers and universities. My second reason for running is to represent the will of the community. For example, I strongly supported the right of the Dominic Conti family to have a review of their appeal of their uniform complaint, and I'm the only board member that did it.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Now we'll move on to Mr. David Fox.
Education's given me everything I have in life. My mother was a teacher in the city of Philadelphia for 30 years that put food on my table and gave me health care when I grew up. I was on track to become a business school professor. I worked through most of a PhD at Wharton, and then I ended up on Wall Street. I wish to bring the skills I've accumulated through my education and hard work, mainly my expertise in finance and my experience in participating in productive, accountable boards, to the service of this great district of great schools, great principals, and great teachers.
Thank you. Mr. Bill Gorback.
This school has given to my 4 children a great education and a great foundation. I want to repay that. I have the experience of having worked my whole career in public education. I've been in various positions. I've been in various schools. I know the impact that every board decision will have on teachers, students, and the entire Conejo Valley community. I want to use my experience to keep Conejo Valley Unified School District as great as it is, but yet keep charging it and challenging it to become greater and greater. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
During the last few years on the board, we've been experiencing incredible budget deficits, and during those years, our board has continued to look at goals for the future, great opportunities for the kids, and had dreams of if more money comes, when more money comes. And now that money is finally starting to come and we have a great bond on the ballot, I would like to be part of the board that implements some of those great plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
Look, it's really all about the kids, right? And everyone in the audience here and everyone on the panel would attest to that, and everyone would agree to it. But the reality of the whole thing is there's complicated issues that are involved here. And my background is in healthcare. So if you think education is complicated, why don't you try healthcare? I've got 30-plus years experience as a business executive, and I've been as involved in community affairs as really anybody, certainly anybody on the board here. I think the next step for me as I continue on my career, my dedication to the community, is all about this and giving back to the kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. And now Mr. John Anderson.
Thank you. There's no question that the opportunities available to a young person are founded in a great education, and there's no question that the prosperity of the community and the broader state are founded in having a great education system for all students. As I alluded to earlier, my father was a teacher, and one of the values just drilled into all 5 of his children was that you must get a quality education. It will open up so many more opportunities for you. I do appreciate what Pat shared about the tough budget difficulties our district has had, but quite frankly, they've dropped the ball over the past 10 years in dealing with declining enrollment. And we certainly have more opportunities for us in terms of partnerships with community partners, in terms of developing more magnet schools and other opportunities to keep parents and students from leaving our district for other districts and other alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to question number 2, and I must warn the candidates, this is a bit of a long, compound question, so you may want to take notes while I read it. All right. What kinds of influence do you think special interest groups should have on board decisions related to curriculum and materials used for student instruction? And, second part of the question, how would you go about making decisions about quality instruction if outside pressure is brought to bear on the board? We're going to begin this time with Mr. Mike Dunn.
Excuse me, could you repeat the last?
Yes, absolutely. I'll repeat the whole question. First part of the question. What kinds of influence do you think special interest groups should have on board decisions related to curriculum and materials used for student instruction? And, second part, how would you go about making decisions about quality instruction if outside pressure is brought to bear on the board? All right. Mr. Mike Dunn, you have 1 minute.
Okay, let's start with quality instruction. I'm a firm believer that you don't implement experiments in the public schools. Common Core is an experiment. I can't do much about it, but I don't like the idea that it's never been proven successful anywhere and we're forced to implement it in our school system. As far as outside influences go on curriculum, I have talked to Bob Yietza. I've asked him to include more citizens in our textbook selection committee. I would like people on that committee that don't have any affiliation with the public schools or don't have any children in the public schools. Right now, it's pretty much a closed committee. I do believe, though, that of the necessity for unions. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Mr. David Fox.
Okay, I think there's two categories of special interests we need to separate. One are economic special interests, and they have absolutely no role in the decisions we make, and they should not. If we're speaking about community groups of special interest, I think there should be a community inclusion to the degree that is reasonably possible and prudent in decision-making processes. There shouldn't be the tyranny of the majority. There shouldn't be the tyranny of the minority. People should listen to each other respectfully, without rancor and without name-calling, and hear the various concerns and see if there is a solution we could work to that satisfies everybody and upsets as few people as possible. We clearly have an educational mission to provide in terms of the quality of education. Quality comes first, and the goals of education come first and should not be compromised. But listening collaboratively to the members of the community is not compromise. That's good leadership.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Bill Gorbach.
The community is our constituents. The students, the parents, the community in general are our constituents. We will listen to them and hear out and make sure that we honor, to the best that we can, any views that they have. Ultimately, though, a lot of decisions of curriculum and quality of education is brought down to us by state mandates, by funding controls. Again, it's listening, it's hearing everybody, and then implementing with taking that into consideration and implementing the best educational processes. Special interests are special and should be heard, but if it's to benefit anything other than the kids, then decisions have to be made that just specifically benefits the education community.
Thank you. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
I think, unfortunately, special interests has come to have a very negative connotation about it, and there are lots of groups that have special interests. PTA has a special interest. It's interested in children and education. I think it's very important that we listen to all special interest groups. We try hard as a board when there is an issue before the board to hold open discussion sessions so that any group who has information or opinions on what we are deciding has a chance to come and speak before the board, and then we can decide as a board how we are going to handle whatever the particular problem or discussion is about.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
Pat's correct, as are several of the other members on the panel, that special interests have sort of taken on this connotation and a stigma as being something that's negative, but the reality is, as Pat said, the PTA is a special interest, parents are a special interest. Those of you who are here today are a special interest because you have a concern about where the direction of the school district and the schools are going. There's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the democratic way. You determine what your issues are and you try to make your voices known, and those voices should be heard. In my career, I've had the good fortune to work cooperatively and collaboratively with a lot of different special interests, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You have to do that. You have to go through the process of making sure that you're not making knee-jerk reactions to things that come down the pike. You take a thoughtful and a pragmatic approach to decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. John Anderson.
It's great being able to leverage off the great answers of those coming before you. I would add to Mr. Fox's comment about those with an economic gain. There are also those with a hard ideological gain that I think we need to keep a kind of a wary eye out for those organizations also. But for the most part, I think the word is balance. When we have someone that comes to us with a particular agenda and it feels just a little bit uncomfortable, then you need to seek out opinions from the other side and make sure that there's great great representation for the issue that's being discussed. So I think balance is the item that we need to keep in mind. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Tony Doles.
Speaking of balance, I think I can see legitimate special interest groups and perhaps illegitimate special interest groups. Among the legitimate interest groups are the parents of children in our schools, that's legitimate, and the taxpayers that are paying for that quality education. Now, in regards to illegitimate special interests, you can consider the federal government, who has no constitutional authority influencing education, exercising the power of the purse and becoming a very powerful special interest. So I will be representing the individual, the parents of children in our schools, and the taxpayers.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to be moving on to the audience-submitted questions now. And we will be starting with Mr. David Fox. Each of you will have 1 minute to respond to this question. Given that you are a single vote on a board of 5, how will you effectively build consensus and create any change by board policy?
Thank you. This is a challenge I've dealt with most of my professional career. When you work in large organizations, as I have, everything is collaborative. The only power you have is the power to convince, persuade, build teams, and consensus. In creating an empowered board, I believe everybody in the board gains from that. And when the board understands what their power can be and what their scope and influence can be, I think that people will embrace it. It's not about me imposing my will or my ideas on other people. It's empowering other people to express whatever views they believe they've been elected to represent. I believe that's empowering for everybody, and I believe that that is something that I've done before and I know how to get done.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bill Gorbach.
As a counselor, I've always been in positions of reaching consensus. I believe that listening is as important as talking. As a board member, for issues that come up, one of the first things that I would do, I know things come up and then we kind of vote on them at the next meeting or meetings after that. One of the first things I would do is go out and find how it affects and what people feel about it and listen to their feelings about issues. As a consensus maker, again, I would listen to everybody's point of view. I would try to present my point of view in the best way. But again, as a district, we are powerful because we all collaborate and work together. And that's the way the board is most powerful too, by collaboration, reaching consensus.
Thank you. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
As one board member, I only have one vote, and we do work together. I think it's my job as a board member to do all the homework I can, to do the research, to get any data that's required to support whatever my opinion on an issue might be. I think one of the fortunate things we have on the board is that we do have information items before we have action items. So when something comes to the board for information, we get to hear what other board members' opinions are, and we get the chance to ask district staff to come back to us with more information that help us make an informed decision. And I think we as a board have a good opportunity on the board to discuss and weigh other people's opinions. I think we've done fairly well at forming consensus, and while people think it's bad that we have a 5-0 vote, I think it just shows that we've worked well together.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
A single person on the board is not intended to make all the decisions and to run roughshod over anything. That's why there's a board, and that's why there's 5. That's why there are at times differing voices that can be healthy, and it can be collaborative, and it lends a good perspective to ending up with the best results and outcomes. You know, the great news is, as a district, we've got a lot of talented people teaching our kids in the schools, running the schools, and running the administration. So when there are issues that come up, the folks on the board have historically been able to get great information and data from the folks that support them as a great resource. And that will continue. And I think the logical approach that you take is just like I've done everything in business, is you listen to all the sides, the points of view, and you get the best information you have to make the best decisions going forward.
Great. Mr. John Anderson.
In late August, when I sat down with my campaign team and my supporters, we talked about what we wanted the campaign to be. And collaboration and diplomacy were a large part of who we wanted to be and what I wanted the community to see in me. So the question isn't so much, can you be a collaborative person, can you work towards consensus, but how do you get other people to trust you and respect you, and how do you display trust and respect to others? And at this point I want to thank my team, because I believe we have demonstrated that we have a spirit of diplomacy and a spirit of collaboration and a spirit of respect, even for those with whom we disagree. So I think that the proof is in the pudding.
Okay, Mr. Tony Dolt.
A case in point was the Conti case, where I believe approximately 300 people were denied the right to make a public comment before the board decided. Now, in my own, many events changed our lives forever, and I think I have told you that as a child, my family lost the right to freedom of speech, assembly, faith, and control over education of their children. So I am focused on protecting individual freedom and giving every parent a voice. So you would know from my background where I would have stood on allowing those parents to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Mike Dunn.
Well, first of all, let me start by saying that I've only voted about 10 times in the last 10 years against the recommendation of the superintendent. The way I deal with controversy is first to anticipate it. When I see a controversial issue developing, the first thing I do is I email the superintendent saying we may have a problem here. One of the issues, for example, would have allowed girls to leave school without parent consent to get confidential medical treatment. That came as an information item to the board. I brought it to Mario Contini's attention that this might cause controversy within our community. He was wise enough to table the motion. We are one of the few school districts in California that still requires parental consent when your child leaves school. Another thing I do is I have an outstanding knowledge of the education code, and I write letters to the editor.
Thank you. Our next question comes from a student, and I move that one to the front because I think all of you will are interested in representing students. And that question is, I am a student at Westlake High School, and I, along with dozens of other students, experience the same problem every day. The district has locked the boys' bathroom every day starting at lunch. While this may seem trivial, it is a major inefficiency that results in the loss of much valuable time in class. The next closest bathroom is very far away. What would you do to resolve this issue if you were elected? We'll begin with Mr. Bill Gorback.
Thank you, first of all, as a student, for being here. Second of all, for presenting the question. What I would do is first of all, I understand your frustration. Having been on campuses, I know how fast lunch period goes. I would find out the reasons why that is done and whether there is some arrangement that can be made to have those bathrooms open. Students should have bathrooms as close as they need on campus, and arrangements should be made for that. Now, again, by finding out both sides of the issue, why those bathrooms are closed, maybe we could find, again, reaching a consensus, reaching a compromise, try to find how to find the solution for why those bathrooms were closed, and then open them up with that solution and that accommodation.
Thank you. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
Interestingly enough, this issue has come before the board before. Every time students come to speak to us as a class assignment, they're looking for an issue they can raise, and they raise the locked bathrooms. I thought the last time that we handled this, Westlake had dealt with it and actually reopened some of the bathrooms. The problem is a personnel issue because they don't have enough manpower to cover all those bathrooms, and unfortunately the student behavior in the bathrooms requires supervision. Now that you've brought it to our attention again, We will once again go back to the administration at Westlake and see what they can do about it, because I think before they reached an agreeable solution. When my kids were in school, it was a problem, and we used actually PTA volunteers to monitor the restrooms so that we could keep more restrooms open.
Okay. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
Yeah, what she said. There's a, excuse me, sometimes there's an advantage to having been there, done that thing, and Pat certainly has that, and she brings that to the board, and hopefully we'll continue to bring that to the board going forward. Listen, oftentimes there's issues that come up in situations where you look upon these decisions that are made and you wonder why. And sometimes there's good reasons for those, as she said, the coverage of the restrooms, and sometimes there's not. Sometimes it becomes one of those, gee, that's the way we've always done things. Which, by the way, whether in the public sector or the private sector, is one of those answers that you should never hear. And hopefully as an organization for us, we won't. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. John Anderson.
Well, great, thank you. And I, too, like to leverage off of Pat's great response. The first thing we need to understand is why. Was it a disciplinary issue? Was it a facilities issue? Do we not have the personnel to keep the restrooms clean? So we really need to understand the reason that it's being locked. But I'm an optimist that a solution can be found, be it in supervision or cleaning the facility. I agree it's an important item, and I trust that we have the personnel that can resolve the issue for you.
Okay. Mr. Tony Doltz.
My children share with me all the problems that they encounter in school. So I think parents of the children who are unable to visit the bathroom should make an appointment with the principal and have a discussion and find out what the problem is and how it can be resolved.
Okay. Mr. Mike Dunn.
Okay, a lot of parents come to me with problems, a lot of them. The first thing I try and do is settle this thing by going through the chain of command. And about 90% of the time, I can email Dr. Barstad, and he'll get back to me with either a response from the principal or a response from the directors, and that's the end of it. We have had a couple of situations, though, where I got a complaint from the parents that we weren't able to solve. One of them was the Conti issue. The Contis came to me, they told me about the problem, I went to the superintendent. The superintendent and I disagreed on a solution. You need to know that on Thursday, before the Tuesday that the appeal was to be heard by the board, I begged the superintendent to hear public comments before we voted. Another issue that we disagreed on was the appointment of the assistant superintendent of personnel. We eventually got Mark McLaughlin, who would not be in that position right now if I had not lobbied for him. And Mark is doing a great job for the district.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Mr. David Fox.
I think the way Ms. Phelps described the situation frames the problem pretty well. It's a resource problem. We don't have enough people to man the restrooms. We need to explore ways in which we can solve that problem. Whether it be PFA volunteers, perhaps student leaders who are, of a senior enough status who can do that. We need to possibly explore non-economic ways to solve this problem, because it's clearly something important to the student body as it keeps coming up, and we have to continue to work with the schools and the community to come up with a solution that works. Thanks.
Thank you. I now have another question from the audience. We will begin with Mrs. Pat Phelps in response to this question. Do you see parents choosing homeschooling or private schools as an example of something wrong with Conejo Valley Unified School District? After all, it is the parent's choice, and Conejo Valley Unified School District can't be all things to all students.
I think the end of the question was kind of an answer to that question, because we can't be all things to all students. And some parents choose to homeschool because they would like to have a religious component in their child's education. They choose to homeschool because they don't like class sizes. They think their children do better in a one-to-one situation. And I think we do not have great numbers of people leaving our district. There will always be people who choose homeschooling. There will always be people who choose charter schools because of the services those schools can provide. And we cannot be all things to all people, but we try our best to be all things to most people.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
This is America, land of the free, home of the brave. We have choice, and choice is good. There's nothing wrong with parents choosing to educate their children at home. Some of my best friends do the same thing. For them, it becomes a personal choice due to faith-based issues or others. I don't think from the board's perspective that should be something we look at as a negative and look at as something that we think we have to control or fix. It's really a matter of taking a look at this and saying, how do we best serve the needs of the 20,000 kids in the Conejo Valley that we serve today? That's really what it's all about.
Thank you. Mr. John Anderson.
Well, there's no question that the choice is going to be very different from family to family. For some families, they simply want a different environment than the district's able to employ. However, I view it to a certain degree. Well, let's take a look at the 400 students a year that are opting out not to go to private school or homeschool, but are opting to go to other school districts. So there's no question that there's an opportunity for us to do a little bit better job in the choices that we offer. I also think we're missing the boat for partnerships. There's an opportunity to do more partnerships with homeschooling families, and I think with a little bit more vision and a little bit more common sense, we can help benefit both groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tony Doltz.
The number of children or families bailing out of the school district is not decreasing, it's not staying the same, it is increasing. This means the families are voting with their feet. I support every family's attempt to give their children an excellent quality education, and I support homeschooling.
Thank you. Mike Dunn.
Okay, when you've got 10% of your customers who are leaving the district, the first thing you should say to yourself is why. Now, not only is our enrollment declining, and it's been declining for the last 6 years, but there's waiting lists at the alternative schools in this area. Now that concerns me. The first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to hold hearings and invite the public to attend and tell us where we can do better. I want to listen to the parents rather than dictate to them. Another issue that concerns me is that we have parents who actually live within the school district. They live in the Conejo Valley, yet they choose to send their children to Simi, Oak Park, or the Las Virgenes School District. As far as homeschooling goes, I think we can start by listening to the customers, finding out how we can improve the district. Like I said before, we've got a very good school district, but we can do better, and we must do better because we've lost 65 teachers because of our 10% decline in enrollment.
Thank you. Mr. David Fox.
I think the key questions are how many and why. I think of it as the problem a restaurant would have. Obviously, you can't have something on the menu for everybody, but if enough customers don't like what's on your menu, you can't complain about your customers if you're a customer-facing business. You have to look at your menu and figure out, can you possibly offer what they want? If you can't, that's one problem, but can you explore that problem? I also have to mildly disagree with something Mr. Dunn said. It's not 10%, it's 20%. The enrollment in the CVUSD has gone from 25,000 to 20,000. That's 20%. Also, in terms of charters being a solution, I agree with that in the right contexts. I was just at the MATES board meeting earlier in the week, and that is one fantastic, well-run school. Its charter was not approved by the CVUSD. The CVUSD has not approved a single charter school. And it's hard to believe what could have been wanting in that. And we have to have a coherent, logical, fair mechanism for proper charters to be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bill Gorbach.
I would like to use the opportunity of parents moving their kids to either homeschooling or other schools outside the district as an opportunity to learn. I would like, as I believe Mr. Dunn said, I'd like to have hearings and listen and find out why parents leave. On the other hand, when we listen to some of the comments that have been said here, we tend to neglect that our district also attracts somewhere near 500 students a year from other districts that come into Conejo Valley. And that shows that we must be doing something right. So I think we have to honor that. I think we recognize that part of our losses have to do with a lower child rearing rate in this area. But I want to use the opportunity to hear people's reasons and to improve the district to provide for people's needs.
Thank you. I have another audience question now that's more general. We're going to begin with Mr. Brian Sullivan. What goals do you hope to achieve if elected?
I think we addressed that a little bit in the opening statement. For those of you who may not be aware, Measure I is on the ballot this coming election. And if you've not taken a few minutes or some time to study up on it, I'd encourage you to do so. It's an incredibly well thought out bond measure, and it deserves your consideration and hopefully a positive vote on your part. So number one goal is to make sure that the measure and the funds are spent accordingly and appropriately into the infrastructure and investing in the technology for our students so that they'll be able to compete effectively in the outside world, whether in higher education or in their careers as they graduate beyond high school.
Thank you. Mr. John Anderson.
Thank you. Number one, no school closures. Our district made a tremendous error in judgment in closing Meadows and University. As noted, Mates is running at full capacity, 360 students a year. That's over $2 million a year in lost revenue because of our short-sightedness. No more school closures. Number two, we've already talked about understanding why parents are leaving the district. That would be a great opportunity for us to understand why are people choosing Oak Park over Thousand Oaks High School or Newberry Park High School. Number three, restore employee benefits and pay. There were tremendous cuts over the past 20 years. We're an employee-centric operation. We owe it to our many great employees to restore the benefits and lost hours that they suffered. Parents hate Common Core. I've knocked on 2,000 doors, and parents want nothing to do with Common Core. We need to help our teachers be able to augment and supplement around that program until it's corrected by the state. And finally, program enhancement. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Tony Doltz.
Our children are at risk of losing their privacy. Schools have collected data on students for a number of years. But beginning with Common Core, and I should say intensified with Common Core, and also the weakening of the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act in 2011, more private information is being collected on the students. Yet, here in California, the parents' participation in assessments, surveys, and in appropriate questions is totally voluntary. And also parents have the legal right to opt out. The school district has failed in telling the parents about their legal rights to opt out. And I will see to it that the parents are educated about their rights and the risks that their children are being exposed to.
Thank you. Mr. Mike Dunn.
Okay, I've got three major goals. Number one, let's finish the technology upgrade so that every classroom in our school district has access to high-speed, fiber optic, broadband internet access. That's one. Number two, I want to give every employee in this district a 3% one-time bonus using surplus property funds. I appreciate the suffering they went through when they went along with us. Number three, I want to restore the health care benefits that some of our employees lost during our budget cuts. It's not fair to be working for this district and not have health care benefits. I also, in the limited time that I have left, I want to update that figure that I gave you about declining enrollment. That was a net loss. That included all the people that have actually come to the district. And also, I voted for the Mates Charter, and I'm the only board member who did vote for both the charter schools in this district.
Thank you. Mr. David Fox.
Okay, well, my goals are pretty much echoed by my opening statement, but I think it's important to stress better, more efficient management of our resources leads to more in the classroom. And given the financial challenges we have, we're coming out of the recession, but we're still not completely healed. And the challenges we face before us, that's either going to make everything we're talking about possible or rendering everything impossible. It's a preemptive situation. We have to increase the amount of funding to state pension plans. That's required. That's mandated. The LCAP and the LCFF frameworks have the potential of shifting monies out of our district, especially if we have another recession, in a way that's never happened before. And we have not completely, as I said, recovered all our funding from 2007. So our ability to steward that and manage that is vital to the continued excellence of our district. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Bill Gorbach.
I think to provide for our students' needs as they go on to global careers and to education at the finer schools, the first thing we have to focus on is the technology and eventually giving our students online curricula. The bond measure, of course, includes this. All of our schools will be wired for high-speed internet access. That's a plus. Eventually, to get away from textbook curricula that are obsolete by the time the box is open, we need to be going into online curricula. Another of my goals is to have increased STEAM. STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math for all of our children at a younger age, so that they are doing projects in these areas before they even know those ugly-sounding words. Then we can tell them that when they enjoy doing this, those words are what I just said.
Thank you, Mr. Gorbach. All right, Mrs. Pat Phelps.
I think several of my goals are actually included within the bond, and they've already been mentioned. The improved technology, improved science and lab facilities, more hands-on learning opportunities for our students. My goals are basically student-centered. I think one of the biggest issues we actually face in the district is the achievement gap. Our test scores continue to rise and rise for our brightest students, but for our lowest students, they do not rise at the same rate. And I think we need to find a way to give the programs and training to our teachers that can help us narrow that achievement gap and give all kids an equal opportunity to learn.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next audience question now. We will begin with Mr. John Anderson. The question is, have you educated yourself with what it takes to provide the highest quality education, specifically with the best educational tools needed to succeed in this global economy?
Wow, what a great question. As a financial advisor, a big part of my day is reading. And I read 3 newspapers a day, and I read 4 or 5 publications a week. And a big part of that material is understanding what the global economy is demanding. I think a mistake, and not particularly this board, but I think a mistake that educators sometimes fall into is looking only at their little bubble, their balloon, and this is how we do things in the education environment, rather than really spending time looking at the world and looking at how things are evolving. So I'm one of a couple of people on the board who live in that world, who are looking at the changing employment situation in the world, and I think that would bring a tremendous perspective to this board.
Thank you. Mr. Tony Doltz.
This is a question that truly deserves a lot of research, because our world is changing very fast. Transportation is now quicker and cheaper, so it is easier for manufacturers, for example, to find cheap labor someplace else. Also, automation is making workers obsolete in our country as well. So it is difficult to really make a projection because things are moving extremely fast. So what I would like to do is create some kind of infrastructure where we can gauge the pace of this change and the direction in which it's going. Actually, I have heard many experts and read books about this. It's a frightening situation in that the education as we had known it may not help our children succeed in the future. We have to be revolutionary, actually.
Thank you. Mr. Mike Dunn.
Okay, let's see if I can get this done in a minute. The way we educate children is changing. We're going from simple textbooks and a teacher to things like YouTube, Khan Academy, videos, smart boards, Kindle, laptops, licenses, certifications. I support them all. To start, though, we've got to get that high-speed internet access into all the classrooms. Now, you talk about the achievement gap with some of our disadvantaged students. Well, they've got an outstanding program at Conejo Elementary School. It's called the Open Classroom Program. Anna Alvarez was kind enough to give me a tour. Here's what works, people. Number 1 is parents. We've got to encourage parents to participate in the education of their children, and that's what they do in the open classroom. I'd like to comment, though, briefly. The enrollment in our district is declining, but it's not because of the birth rate, because alternative schools have waiting lists.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Mr. David Fox.
Yes, I'm an information junkie. I'm a knowledge junkie. When I'm not running for school board, I'm usually in the middle of about 4 or 5 books at a time. And I read voluminously in nonfiction, particularly around the subject of education. As I said, I thought at one point in my life I was going to be an educator, and I taught in the classroom for 2 years. In addition, when you want to learn what needs to be done, the first place you have to start is with what you're doing. I've toured I'm attempting to tour every school in the district. I've met with every principal of every high school and middle school, and I'm working through the elementary schools. And I'm amazed at what I didn't know before I did that, and how many varied approaches exist within this district, and how many different viewpoints exist. Marrying that with reading about situations in other places, marrying that with drawing upon the experience of other schools I've attended. I've attended the Juilliard School of Music. I've attended King's College, University of London. I've lectured in many universities, and I speak as often as I can to people who attend others. And I always try to keep an open mind in terms of what approaches could be brought to bear to improve the quality of our school district.
Thank you. Mr. Bill Gorbach.
I have been hands-on for many years in the public school system. So I have been learning day by day of best practices, how to implement them, how to do that. In spite of that, I still do a lot of public reading, learning about best practices. I, like David, am trying to get to every campus on the district and learning from the principals themselves what works best in the district. So I think constant learning, constant educating, and preparing for the best things that we can do as a board is necessary to keep up.
Great. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
I think one of the goals of the much maligned Common Core standards is actually in preparing our students for a global economy. It's not in what is being taught, but in the method of teaching. We are looking at teaching children to be better communicators, better collaborators, to be more creative in their thinking, and deeper thinkers in their learning. Excuse me.
Mrs. Phelps is recovering from a cold.
I also have the good fortune to live with a gentleman who happens to be on 2 college boards, and we have frequent discussions about what colleges are looking for in their incoming students and how they're looking to educate students in a global economy. So I look at not only our level, but at the next level beyond, too.
Mr. Brian Sullivan.
My wife is a teacher, and I get a lot of feedback from my wife about what is needed. And a lot of the comments that were uttered previously are absolutely correct. We do need to get our parents involved. But also the comment about change and what's going on in technology. You've heard the saying that change is inevitable, but the reality is the pace of change is increasing at a level that we've never seen before. Most of you have got things attached to your belt or your purse that has got more combined computing ability and data than the Pentagon held 30 years ago. And that kind of, we haven't even figured out what the questions are going to be 5 years from now. So how you actually prepare for that, I think, is to some degree a matter of getting the best and the brightest minds in education and in technology and in business and the economy together so that we can make the best decision for the kids going forward.
Thank you. That's actually the perfect segue into the next question. We will begin with Mr. Tony Doltz. How do you plan to attract and retain the best teachers and staff for the school district?
I think it's a combination of factors. I think teachers are better qualified to answer this question than I do, but you want to live in a pleasant community, and you want to be rewarded for your work, both in terms of professional recognition and pay. So I think we have it pretty much all here in the Conejo Valley. Teachers will be happy here.
Thank you. Mr. Mike Dunn.
Well, I want to start by mentioning that my wife is a teacher. Here's how you attract and retain the best. It starts with the reputation of your district. Your best are going to be attracted to other districts that have an excellent reputation. And we have one of the best school districts in California, if not the United States of America. Now let's talk about retention. I put an action item on the agenda to give every employee in the district a 3% bonus. You have to understand that during about a 3 or 4 year period, we had to cut the budget $20 million. Not only did our employees lose their gross pay, some of the gross pay, but they also lost money to the cost of inflation. So that's how you retain them. You make them feel appreciated and you compensate them well.
Thank you. Mr. David Fox.
I've spoken to a number of teachers about this, and the answer I keep getting back the most is teachers, foremost, need to feel like they're appreciated. That comes from a variety of mechanisms. It can come from the feedback they get from their students, from parents, and simply feeling as if they're accomplishing something and making a difference. Compensation does come in there too, but I honestly don't think that's number one. Obviously, teachers should not have to suffer or sacrifice vis-a-vis their opportunities in others equally excellent districts. We do know that, when my mother was teaching in Philadelphia, the teachers who taught in the inner cities were often paid more than the teachers who were teaching in the suburbs because, frankly, a lot of those aspects of job appreciation were wanting, and those were much more difficult situations. But I honestly believe making teachers feel they're appreciated, and in our school district, they do feel like they're making a difference because they are making a difference. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Bill Gorbach.
Of course, we have to start by looking for every way possible within the budget to compensate all staff, teachers, classifieds, all staff fairly. Second of all, of course, providing a great community as Conejo Valley is. Third of all, we have to show our teachers that we respect their ability and their creativity, that when things come up in Common Core, that we respect their creativity to implement those in the way that they best can implement. Common Core gives a lot of freedom. It's mainly a process-oriented as far as teaching critical thinking skills. So teachers have a freedom within Common Core to implement that. And again, just recognition that our teachers are great and that they should be respected for that.
Thank you. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
I think, as it was mentioned before, the reputation of the community and the school district are very important in getting teachers to take a first look at our district. But I think once they get here, they can appreciate the support they get, the training they get, and the value that the district places on their opinions. We try to bring our own teachers as our staff development leaders. We try to promote our teachers as leaders in the district, and we, I lost my third point. We like to bring the teachers to the table whenever there are issues to be discussed. Teachers are included on committees, technology committee, budget committee. Many of the committees that we have in the district include teachers because the teachers know that we value their input and their opinions.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
I've been in the healthcare and employee benefits arena for over 30 years, and very critical to the role of employers, whether they be public or private, is how you attract and retain good quality people. And the one word that comes back time and time again, and the one you'll see more and more, I think, as the world continues to evolve, is the term of engagement. It's been said that you have to have a great community, and we do. We live in not only an aesthetically beautiful place, it's well governed as a city and a county. We're one of the safest places in America. It's a great place to live. But I think the term of engagement really comes down to the folks' ability to be able to do good work and make a difference. And I think when you talk to the teachers at the various schools, you're going to find that they feel that they, by and large, have a great opportunity to do good work and be part of a successful team.
Thank you. Mr. John Anderson.
And one of the good things about going last is you get to think about it, and one of the bad things is everyone uses all the good answers before it gets to you. You know, 30 years in corporate America, and public employees and private employees are very similar. Initially, they're drawn to benefits and pay. That's always a great attractant when you start. But ultimately, the quality of the work environment is what keeps them. And a quality work environment is going to be defined in part by the ongoing educational opportunities you give to them. It has to do with, we've talked about the parents and the support, but one word that hasn't been used yet is fairness, that they have to have a sense that everyone within the organization is being treated fairly. So thank you.
Thank you. This question comes from a student, and we will be beginning with Mr. Mike Dunn. Many classes at my high school are at overcapacity for enrollment. For example, my calculus class doesn't have enough desks to seat all the students. How would you address this issue?
Well, the first thing I would do is to invite the student to email me with their issue. That way we can understand what the problem is, the student and I. And then what I would do is I would then send or forward that email to the superintendent. And the superintendent, being the good man that he is, he would investigate. And this is how I've solved problems in the past in the district, and this is how I would attempt to solve that student's problem.
Thank you, Mr. David Fox.
As I've been visiting some of the high schools, I've noticed the same thing in some of the actually the honors classes is calculus. I did notice great teachers, but an amazing number of students in class. I would count some of them in my head, and I was quite surprised to see the class sizes that I was seeing. I'd like to understand better what our budgetary choices are around that, and as I keep stressing, the challenge is to use the resources we have to try to get more out, try to figure out what our options are, what our staffing options are, and what choices or alternatives we'd have to make inevitably to meet those to meet those goals and to see what options are before us. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Bill Gorbach.
Again, those classes, well, all of our classes are very, very important. And to have large class sizes, we have to look for other solutions. So as everybody said before me, I would hear what the problem is. I would bring it up for discussion and with administration to see what options we have, whether there's possibility of paying for a prep period for a teacher to make an extra class, something in that area. But we discuss all the various options to create extra classes, possibly if we can, and bring those class numbers down.
Thank you, Mrs. Pat Phelps.
I think the board struggles with this all the time. It's not our job to determine the master schedules for the school sites. We need to leave school site governance to the school sites. But we certainly can refer the issues, if they come to us, back to the appropriate people and then request reports on what's going on to help solve the problem. One of the issues we're actually dealing with right now is how we can expand offerings in the honors classes. Can we increase sections? Can we do we have the teaching capacity where we can have teachers teaching the higher level classes? And usually students would prefer to be in a large class with a great teacher than in a smaller class with a teacher that they do not consider quite as great.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
Well, we have to determine if it's a macro or micro issue. If it's a micro issue, then the student who wrote the question, on Monday you'll send an email to Mike Dunn, who will send it off to Jeff. If it's after the election, you'll send it to me, and then I'll send it to Jeff, and we'll see if we can get some resolution. If it's a macro issue, this is, what Pat had said before, I think is very true. You got to look at, and Bill, I think, also referenced this. You've got to take a look at the resources that are available and make sure that they're being allocated appropriately. This is the same approach that you take, again, in the public sector that we also take in running private businesses and large corporations. It's really a matter of trying to allocate scarce resources in the best method possible.
Thank you. Mr. John Anderson.
I know that our headquarters staff, our principals, and our teachers want to have balanced classrooms, and they want to have enough teachers. I think what hasn't been said is that the district has suffered a tremendous budget cut over the past 4 years, which we're just now starting to regroup from. And I do have confidence in our principals and our staff that they will try and have the best balanced classrooms that they possibly can. It's unfortunate, but I'm thankful that we at least had a classroom for you to attend.
Okay, Mr. Tony Doltz.
This illustrates why we should replace the incumbents on the board with new school board members with children in the school, because we eliminate all that telegraphing of information. My children tell me everything about what is happening in the school. So we parents could then go to the principal, as I do when there's a problem, and problem is solved, okay? So, but my oldest is 13 years old. Some school board members have been there before my son was born and before the iPhone was invented. I think to have a more responsive school board, we need new school board members, and preferably if they have children in the school.
Thank you. All right, our next question is about your background. We're going to begin with Mr. David Fox. What other community service experience do you have?
I think service is a pillar of somebody's character. I purposely not put service on my resume, not because I don't do it, but because I believe you do it for its own purpose. I don't believe you parade it out. I'm not judging other people for what they do. It's a very personal choice. Since the question's posed to me, I'm a member of Kiwanis, which is one of the largest, oldest service organizations in the country. They focus primarily service on children. I've also been very involved for the past decade with parents of teenage drug abusers and with the teenagers themselves, particularly counseling parents through this horribly anguishing ordeal which nobody ever imagines they're going to have to live through. I've seen miraculous things in doing that, and it's been one of the most fulfilling aspects of my life. I've seen kids who I didn't think had hope grow into amazingly productive, functional adults, and I've helped parents live through some of the worst experiences of their lives. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bill Gorbat.
I work quite a bit with my religious institution on the side. I've also worked with parent-student councils and give to community in those ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Pat Phelps.
As I mentioned in my introduction, I've been a long time involved parent, first in PFA, then PTA, and at all levels. And it becomes kind of a life-consuming project. I've also served the district as the chair of 2 bond campaigns, and I sit on several community boards, mostly through PTA and through my school board involvement. District technology I mentioned. I also serve on the Conejo Youth and Families Board, which is a joint powers board comprised of Parks and Rec, the city, and the school district, and we work together for projects that benefit the students in our district. I also serve on county boards, mostly involved with education. It's basically become my life.
Thank you, Mr. Michael Sullivan. I'm sorry, Mr. Brian Sullivan. I apologize.
Thank you. I currently sit on a number of boards, one for the Ventura County Sheriff's Foundation Community Board, also on the board of directors for Fit for the Cause. It's an organization that through fitness and health-related activities provides money for health-related causes. Been involved in my local church. We do mission trips down to Mexico, and I've gone with both my girls to build houses down there. I've been a youth soccer coach and referee. I've, let's see, what else is there? My other daughter was a swimmer, and I sat on the board of directors for the swim club. And the thing I'm probably most proud of is over the last 6 years, I've served as a big brother in the Big Brothers Big Sisters of Ventura County for 2 little brothers.
Thank you. Mr. John Anderson.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, my wife and I spent many years with our 3 children in the PTA and PFA organizations in Newbury Park. I served for over 10 years as a coach for both youth and high school track and cross country. I served for over 10 years on the board of the Ventura County Youth Track Conference and as both board member and president of the Newbury Park Track Club. I spent 12 years on the board of my church and many ministry activities there, including worship leader, if that's important to any of you. I'm a current executive board member of a county political organization. I'm currently a board member of SurePath, which is a nonprofit credit counseling agency here in Ventura County, and I'm currently serving as part of a street ministry for the homeless here in Thousand Oaks.
Thank you. Mr. Tony Doltz.
In my family, we dedicate intensely all our time on our children. We have a hybrid public homeschooling educational regime, and we also take our children traveling, visiting various countries, 5 weeks in the summer and 3 to 4 weeks in the winter. So we are dedicated to giving our own children a rich, deep education. I have also contributed to the Swedish American Chamber of Commerce for many years, and my wife and I are members of the PTA, so we contribute of our time and money. On my website, you can see actually an extensive coverage of this and all other issues. It's www.dolz.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mike Dunn.
Okay, I'm not certain that prior community service is relevant to being a good board member. I think the most important quality of a good board member, is whether you're going to represent the community when you get elected. Now, I've been on this board for 10 years. I'm the only board member who voted against the closure of Meadows and University. I'm the only board member who voted for the 2 charter schools, Mates and Bridges, and I'm also the only board member who voted to hear the Conti appeal. The purpose of the school board is to represent the community, and prior community service may or may not be relevant, and education may not be relevant.
Thank you. The next question is very timely, given recent news, and I'll begin with Mr. Bill Gorback. What should the district do to prevent violence on campus?
Part of the bond measure, and even before the bond measure passes, I say that optimistically, is that all schools are secured so that there is only one way to get into the campus. By doing that, that of course helps eliminate people who should not be there from getting in. Now, the case that you alluded to as you introduced the question was a student. At schools that I've been at, we've had situations like that. We had a situation last year at a school I was at. It was deterred right away because our students trusted our school employees. Some of our students who heard that someone was coming on campus with a weapon immediately told administration. They got community resources, and the weapon was discovered before anybody had a chance to do any damage.
Thank you. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
I think there's the facilities element of safety, which was mentioned, all the things covered in the bond, improved locking systems, better alarms, better telephone communication between the office and the classrooms. But I think one of the things that we're doing that really helps prevent the violence is having our police officers right on campus and trying to develop a trust with the student body and our police officers so that students do not feel afraid to talk to them if they hear about issues that are coming up, if they've heard about threats. We recently had a response to a suicide threat that was posted online, and the district worked very quickly with our resources to reach that student and prevent it.
Thank you, Mr. Brian Sullivan.
It's a very difficult topic, and it's one that clearly draws the concern for everybody across the country, especially when we encounter some of these heinous situations. There's much that we're already doing at the district level and at the various schools. And I think we need to recognize the good job that the administrators and the teachers and in accordance with the local police officers have been doing. I've had the good fortune to sit on the Ventura County Sheriff's Foundation, the community board, and the objective of that is to make sure that we get the word out in the community about the good work that our sheriffs and the police actually do in the community. They're not the bad guys. These are the good guys. These are the folks that protect and serve us. And I think the more we continue in that partnership, the more it will benefit the kids in the schools.
Thank you, Mr. John Anderson.
Yeah, there's definitely a distinction between the internal threat and the external threat, and I think having the resource officers on campus is a great idea. Actually, one of my neighbors is a resource officer in a nearby community, and the story she has to share are absolutely tremendous about the benefits of having them present on a campus. I don't think we've yet touched on the education of students, helping them be aware of potential problems on campus and how they can share those problems with their parents or with their counselors, and how we can obviously be continually vigilant for students that might need some extra attention. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tony Doltz.
This is a complex issue because in our country there are communities that are riddled with violence, not only inside a school but out, and it has to do with perhaps spirituality, ethics, things that are part of the community. So if we could support our communities to encourage the value for life and for individual freedom and not to impose our will on others, perhaps we could become a kinder community, society. But as the school board has little they can do about changing the values of a community, I think we just have to be prepared to deal with what we are dealt. And I think we have to educate the children not to bully one another and not to resort to violence, and to learn how to communicate instead.
Thank you, Mr. Mike Dunn.
Well, the good news is that about 98% of the time, I agree with the other 4 board members that I serve with. And one of the issues that we give the highest possible priority is the safety of our students. And we go past talking. We actually allocate money from our budget to make certain that we have some of the safest campuses in California. For example, it's been mentioned that we now have a sheriff's deputy on all of our high school campuses. This was in direct response to some of the violence that occurred several years ago. Also, we've increased the security at our gates. We also have an anti-bullying campaign going on in the district. We also have zero tolerance for anything that's brought to school that can be considered a threat. When you add it all up, we have some of the safest schools in the United States of America, and it's just one less thing for the parents to worry about.
Thank you, Mr. David Fox.
I want to follow up on some of the comments Mike made, and particularly in talking to the principals at the schools, there's been a heavy emphasis on cyberbullying, particularly in being on top of communication networks and getting on top of things before they become problems. And what you'll find is that it's not just cyberbullying you run across, it could also be early threats of other sorts of situations. I think we found nationally that when we exposed these situations, we discovered there were threats available, there were signs available, generally online, that could have been picked up if people were focusing. It's vital to get parents involved in this too, obviously, but our schools, our principals are very aware of this paradigm, and they're very good in involving themselves, other people, students, outside authorities, and whomever else is necessary to keep on top of information channels, because the best protection is early intervention on any of these things. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll begin with Mrs. Pat Phelps for the next audience question, which is, some of the customer, restaurant, and business-related metaphors in the responses to previous questions were sort of unsettling. How can I trust a school board member candidate that seems to be more concerned, whether consciously or subconsciously, with money than the quality of education?
I think the restaurant customer metaphor was just using an example of trying to please customers, but money will always be an issue for schools until our state deems it worthy of state funding. We will be ranked low in the United States for per pupil spending, and we will work hardest to allocate the funds we have. But we do try and keep that not the main issue on our board concerns. When we set about our goals, we don't set about how we're going to raise more money. We are going to look at how we can do the best we can for our kids with the money that we have. And we're looking at new and innovative programs all the time. And even through tough budget times, we continue to offer improved course options for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
I agree with Pat. I don't think there was any reference implying that any of the people on the panel were more interested in money than education. I think everyone on the panel here is very dedicated and has a very real interest in the future and the education of their kids. So I would probably assure anyone who's asked that question or anyone in the audience that that's kind of a non-issue. The money thing does come into play because, like anything, we're playing with scarce resources and objectives and goals that are never ending. It just continues to grow. The expectations are higher, and the allocations and the resources sometimes get squeezed. So sometimes you have to just look for new and better ways to do things, and you do this by looking at other places that have already experienced some of the same things that you have, and then you also bring together a diverse group of people.
Thanks. Mr. John Anderson.
I believe that everyone on this panel this afternoon wants to strive for the best possible educational outcome for every student in the district. But some of the questions we've heard today, why is my calculus class so crowded? Why are the restrooms closed? Those are resource issues that probably additional money probably would have prevented those from happening. When we look at why parents are opting out of the district, and we talk about programs, one in particular, the International Baccalaureate program at Newbury Park High School, a great draw for students outside of the district. And we need to keep our focus on being able to come up with new and innovative ways to help keep families here and to attract families from nearby districts. You know, a single student is going to be worth at least $7,600 a year to us. And we're not focusing on the money, but the more money comes in, the more options we can have, the more teachers we can have for calculus, and the better outcomes we can have for all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tony Doltz.
I have come to know the candidates that are sitting at this table, and I do believe that in their heart what they want is to provide all the children a quality education. And we have to work with the resources that we have, but naturally, if we could increase those resources, that would be a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Mike Dunn.
Okay, this is actually a pretty tough question for me. Because if you look at what works in education, it's a combination of three distinct segments. You've got the teachers. If we're going to attract the highest caliber teacher and the best teacher, we have to compete with other opportunities that they have to make money. And if we don't compensate them fairly, and if we don't compete with private industry, it's going to be tougher for us to attract the best. So I'm a firm believer in restoring some of the pay cuts that we had to make over a 5-year period of over $20 million. In fact, I'd like to see those pay cuts restored before we implement new goals in the district. The other thing is that homeschoolers have been able to give extraordinary educations without a lot of money. We got to get parents more involved, and it also depends upon the individual drive of the student. I like to say that I'm offering an opportunity for an excellent education.
Thank you,
I'm not
Mr.
giving it to you.
Dunn. Thank you. Mr. David Fox.
Yes, I'd like to echo the comments everybody else in this board made. None of us are here to make money. We're not going to make any money. The school district isn't for profit. The school district exists to educate our children. That is its primary and main focus preemptively. That being said, as John mentioned, there are resources, there are finite resources, and there are choices we have to make because of that. And the better we manage our money, the better product we can deliver to the classroom in terms of being able to pay better teachers more, being able to offer more to the classrooms, having small classroom sizes. One of the things I'd love to see is the tremendous success of the AP Capstone program, the IB Baccalaureate program at 2 of our high schools. We should probably look at another platform for Westlake. I'm sure I'm not the first person to think of that. But this is a resource issue. All these things require the unpleasant subject of money as well as vision. We clearly need both, but we can't just ignore that aspect. Most of the job of a school district is managing resources to affect classroom education for our kids. Thanks.
Thanks. Mr. Bill Gorback.
As was already said by everybody, all of us up here and the great board members out there are all out for the best interest of our students. No one is here to look for profit or to compare to products like at a restaurant. We're all looking for the best ways to provide for our students. I think that what we have to do to allocate the funds is, again, research the best for our teachers, provide the best for our teachers, provide the freedom for them to implement programs creatively so that our students have a great investment and buy-in into their learning.
Thank you. All right, starting with Mr. Brian Sullivan with this next question. This week's Time cover story was about the difficulty of firing bad teachers. What would you do to help change or alter this situation?
Well, I don't read Time, but I am familiar with the topic, and really I think the elephant in the room that no one's actually using the term is tenure. And tenure is currently in the state of California. It's going to be determined not by a school board, but it's going to be determined by the courts and the legislature. And whatever decision and determination are made by those entities, it's the responsibility of the people on the school board to carry that forth at the best way possible. Those of us who are citizens in the community, we're parents, we're active community leaders, those of you who are here for a reason. If we have views and perspectives on what should be related to tenure, then I think we have, as individuals, a responsibility to bring that up to our legislators.
Okay. Mr. John Anderson.
Thank you. At the very beginning of the election process, I had the opportunity to spend some time with several of the leaders of our local teachers union, and we had a very good conversation about teacher performance. And I believe that the teachers in our district and their leadership understand that it's to not just the kids' benefit, but to their benefit, their professional benefit, to have quality teachers and to provide, if we do have low-performing teachers, to give them an opportunity to bring their skills up to par, and if not, then it is appropriate to dismiss them. But there's a second dimension to the issue, and that is having people who have the skills and time to be able to evaluate the teachers. And our principals are stressed beyond belief, and we have inadequate time to be able to spend in every classroom. So there are definitely two dimensions to the problem. Teachers that respect the need and having the staff that has the skills and ability to provide an appropriate evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tony Doltz.
Yes, my wife and I have a thriving business thanks to our employees, and we like to measure their performance and reward them accordingly. So I believe on accountability. On the other hand, tenure is regulated by state law. So as a board member, I will uphold the law. If you want more information, please go to my webpage, www.dolz.com.
All right, Mr. Mike Dunn.
Well, as I mentioned before, the most important people in the district are the teachers, because if they don't get the job done, the rest of us are insignificant. We've got extraordinarily good teachers in this district, and it's not by accident. The principals are allowed under their authority, to ask for termination of teachers, or what we call non-renewal of contracts, for the first 2 years. And many of our principals are very, very strict and exercise their rights. As a consequence, in the last 10 years that I've been on this school board, there's only been 2 teachers, just 2, that I had issues with. But I ran my concerns through the administration, and now I'm not aware of any teachers that I don't think are doing an outstanding job for our district. Now, I mentioned before that the principals are critical, but another component that's critical is our assistant superintendent of personnel. That's why I lobbied so hard to get Mark McLaughlin put in that position. I wanted Mark to hire all the teachers in this district for the next 10 years because I have great confidence in him.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Mr. David Fox.
That Time article was most definitely not about the CVUSD. We do not have the type of rigid, hard tenure in the CVUSD that you'll read about in that article. We don't have rubber rooms. We don't have the situations where we just can't get rid of bad teachers. By the way, I know from having a mother as a teacher and from many life experiences, there's nobody that dislikes bad teaching more than teachers themselves. And teachers do not want bad teachers amongst their midst. They do want to help teachers become better by training and mentorship and by various programs, but what falls into the category of just bad teaching or abuse isn't tolerated and shouldn't be tolerated. The challenge is to balance the concept of review, which we're all familiar with in our lives, with the realities that that's a hard, delicate subject sometimes to implement in schools, because you want teachers to be protected from political issues, not so much election-type politics, but regime changes and things like that, yet you want to balance accountability, and that's the challenge we face as a country. Thanks.
Great. Mr. Bill Gorback.
The question talked about the difficulty in firing bad teachers. That's not the main point. As everyone has said here, our district has great teachers. Teachers don't go into teaching, don't go through their college for reasons other than trying to provide the best for our students. So the interest is not in firing, the interest is in continually improving the quality of teaching. That starts with very clear expectations from our administrators, which goes on all the time. Then it starts with extra mentoring with our administrators. That continues. As was said here, I don't think we have a problem of bad teachers, but we have constant ways of continually improving. When a situation does come up, and in another district I've had this, a person came over from the private sector as a scientist. He was a brilliant scientist. But after mentoring from our administration, after mentoring from his fellow teachers, he himself saw the way.
Thank you, Mr. Gorback.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
I'd like to echo everybody else's comment that I do not think this article was aimed at a school district like Conejo Valley. We do have great teachers, and there was a time years ago when it could have been aimed at our district, but through collaboration with our teachers, we've developed a system to ensure that teachers do not get to that point that they're so into the system they cannot be removed. I don't think anybody has mentioned our BITSA program, Beginning Teacher Support and Assessment. It's for every new teacher who comes into the district. It's provided by mentor teachers, and it gives them the support and the evaluation to help them to become better teachers. And if they cannot improve to a point that we think they will be successful in the classroom, then they are recommended to remove themselves from the district. And I think it's made for a very solid and supported teacher corps.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. We're going to start with Mr. Tony Doltz on this question. And I apologize. This is a bit of a long question, but I'm going to try and do it justice. So, my high school had shop classes like welding, auto repair, mechanical drafting, wood shop, and carpentry. What is your feeling on the statement, college isn't right for everyone? And can a high school with an entrepreneur and trade training program facilitate training for these careers, which, in the opinion of this person, cannot be outsourced and will always be in demand?
So our role is to provide a quality education for every student to the best of our ability. So we have to consider that not everyone is created equal. incidentally, that's one of my objections to this Common Core thing. No parent wants their children to be common. We think of our children as being exceptional, and they are. So I think college is not for everyone any more than trade schools are for everyone. But we have to provide an opportunity for every single individual and their calling.
Thank you. Mr. Mike Dunn?
Okay, I agree 100% with the sentiment of that question. Society is changing. The demands of employers are changing. When I joined the LA City Fire Department 35 years ago, they were looking for college degrees. They gave a 3% pay bonus. Now they don't care. They want to see certificates and they want to see licenses. Now, not only do I believe what I just told you, but I've also backed it up. I'm a very, very strong supporter of our adult education program because the skills that people learn in adult education are very relevant to the real world and the jobs that are available. I've asked the superintendent as soon as possible to restore the money that we have been transferring from adult education to the general fund and take that money from the general fund and put it back into adult education so that we can offer more adult education, more career technical education, and more skills like auto shop that are relevant to the needs of employers.
Thank you. Mr. David Fox?
I agree completely with the statement that college isn't for everyone. That's not an elitist statement. That's not a moral statement. That's just a fact. There's nothing unnoble about professions that don't require a college degree. We all require them, we all use them, and those are good livelihoods. And there is no reason, we definitely need people with these skills in our communities, and there is no reason why our schools should not help train for the various aspects of jobs we need in our communities. I think we need to constantly reassess VOTEC and look at what skills, what jobs we're training for, and look at that in the context of an always changing economic environment. There are skills, even when you look at automotive has changed so much in the past 20 years. So many things are chipped out, so many things require computer monitoring rather than the things that were purely mechanical that people were trained in. And we have to make sure that our training and our curricula keep track with the economy.
Thank you. Mr. Bill Gorbach.
First of all, I want to point out that our district does have a vocational ed program. We have an excellent culinary arts program at Newbury Park High. We do have several vocational programs that are excellent. The programs that we have at the adult school are very, very good. We cannot lower our expectation as far as academically for our students just because we feel that they are not bound for college. It's what we provide for them, not where they're going. So we have to give them the topmost education, and that has to be balanced with vocational ed programs like the culinary arts and the automotive program we have here in the district.
Thank you. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
I think the district definitely believes the college is not for everyone, and we are trying our best to provide for the students who are not college bound. We have added an element to the bond for career technical education. We're trying to put more hands-on learning facilities on all the school sites. Where we used to have a shop at every campus, that's no longer feasible. Where we used to have an automotive shop, that's no longer feasible. But we are looking at somehow centralizing these things. And we don't just think it's only for the non-college bound either. College bound students can certainly benefit from a class in woodshop or automotive training or any of the other skills. So it doesn't have to be an either or. We've found too that sometimes these hands-on classes are the very classes that bring our students to school every day. It keeps them interested and engaged in their education and teaches them the relevance of the other classes they're taking.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
Stephen Covey once said that there are two great gifts we give our children. The first is roots and the second is wings. And the second part, as a parent, I can tell you it might be a lot harder than the first part. But as educators and as administrators and board members, that holds true as well. And the message, I think, is how are we preparing these kids for the next stage in their life? And the next stage in their life might be college, or it might not be. There's a young man who graduated from Newbury Park High School about 10 years ago, I think. And he had a job in the private sector, installing home theater equipment. Was a little bit disappointed with the consistency of the quality of the work of his employer, so he started his own business. He now employs 10 people. And I got to tell you, that's a great American success story. That has nothing to do necessarily with college. He may choose to do that at some point in his life. But the fact that we as a society and we as a school district have encouraged and prepared him for that, I think is a great testament.
Thank you. Mr. John Anderson.
You know, having been a follower of the school board and a frequent attender for the past 10 years, I know that many of the board members for quite a number of years have seen the need for more vocational training. But as we talked about in previous questions, sometimes the financial resources aren't there to provide every program we'd like to provide. We do have great opportunities to partner with the Ventura County Board of Education with enhanced and new opportunities. We have a great chance and opportunity to partner with the Community College Board here in Ventura County to get some combined programs that will benefit the students' transition from high school into greater career training. And we also have an opportunity to partner more with area businesses to bring more opportunities to the classroom. So definitely an important topic.
Thank you. One last question from the audience, and then we'll go into our closing statements. Some of you have touched on this. Do you agree with the Common Core curriculum? And within your 1 minute of time, if not, how will you address it? All right, beginning with Mr. Mike Dunn.
Here's my primary objection to Common Core. Common Core eliminates local control of public education. I don't like it when the federal government gets bigger and bigger and our local freedoms get smaller and smaller. I also have concerns about the flexibility of Common Core. As every student is different, the way we educate every student has to be different. And Common Core does not give us the flexibility that we need. Now, what can I do about it? Nothing. This is a decision of the federal government, and this is a decision of Sacramento. What I have told people, though, is that there are certain privacy issues that I'm concerned about. And I've talked to our director of assessment and curriculum and made certain that they understand the need and the right of privacy, which some parents are concerned about.
Thank you. Mr. David Fox.
I agree with the goals of Common Core. The biggest reservations I have about Common Core is the massive increase in testing and testing infrastructure. We already test far more than many of the peer countries to whom we aspire to. And it's hard for me to understand how even shifting more resources toward testing and is going to improve our education. I would wish we'd spend more money on education and trust ourselves to spend less money on testing. That being said, the challenge of the district is to make the best of what we have, as Mike said. And what I would recommend is using the resources around the testing infrastructure as creatively as possible so that we can use them to actually increase the level of education in the classrooms, to have things be as dual purpose as possible, possibly partnering with other districts in the same quandary we are, and just finding ways to get more things into the classroom rather than the test bed. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bill Gorback.
The Common Core cannot be stated as Common Core unless you have the third word, Common Core standards. These are basic standards that the goal is to teach students process more than a list of facts. The process is critical thinking, critical analysis. We want our kids to have the creativity as to how to analyze, how to critically think. So I am a very positive supporter of Common Core standards. And the reason I keep emphasizing standards is, again, these are not the thing that everybody has to just reach, but these are a minimum for all graduates so that those graduates who are going on to other sources will, of course, be expected to exceed those standards.
Thank you. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
I'd like to kind of echo what Bill said. These are standards. They are not the only thing you can teach. They are the basic things you must teach, and you can go on from there to teach anything you feel is for the good of your students. The testing, I'm not sure it's more testing. There's always been too much testing in the schools. I think this is a better form of testing. It's going to teach depth of knowledge much more securely, then true or false question, a short answer, multiple choice, including essays and testing is going to be a real first. I happen to have a sister-in-law who sat on one of the Common Core committees, worked on the math standards, and I know her motivation and I know her belief in the capability of students and the need for math in the global economy that we have talked about.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Sullivan.
Mike is correct. The ship has sailed in terms of Common Core. And our job, whoever ends up sitting on the board, is to do the very best job that we can do to make sure that as we look at this, the standards are set as a floor and not a ceiling. And the good news is we've got amazing administrators and terrific teachers all across the district that are doing great work in getting those kids above the floor and up toward the ceiling. This is not something you should be afraid of. This is something that we should embrace, and we should make sure that we ensure that our kids are prepared to be able to compete effectively in the outside world, because these are the same standards that kids from 49 other states across the country are being held to.
Thank you. Mr. John Anderson.
Common Core is not merely standards. It involves curriculum and it involves teaching processes. And to think that children in Central California will learn the same as children in South Central Los Angeles or even New York City will learn identically is fallacious. Common Core is federal overreach at its finest. I believe the Department of Education has definitely overstepped its bounds in its, I'll use the term mandate for the use of Common Core. They're even suing the state of Oklahoma for trying to opt out of Common Core. That being said, I like what Mike said. It's here. What are we going to do with it? I trust our staff and I trust our teachers, and I think the WISE board will do all it can to support its teachers and staff in augmenting and supplementing the material in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tony Dolt.
This is going to startle parents out there and journalists. Common Core doesn't exist for us because there have been no assessments. There are no outcomes for Common Core. When you hear the education establishment trump the benefits of Common Core, they're talking about wishful thinking. It's going to do that, it's going to accomplish this, whatever. There's no outcomes. It's all vapor. We do have the nation's best standards already, the 1997 standards that have been copied by other states that have been leaders in education. We came to be one of the greatest economies in the world, and we led the technology revolution based on our 1997 standards, and there are outcomes. Common Core is vapor, understand this, but it's accompanied by money. The Race to the Top grant lubricates the state.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dultz. Okay, at this time, I will now call on each candidate in reverse alphabetical order to make a 1-minute closing statement. We will now begin our closing statements with Mr. Brian Sullivan.
Thank you. As a 30-year senior healthcare executive, I've had the good fortune to work with and manage thousands of employees over the years. I've managed and balanced budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I've worked cooperatively and collaboratively with a diverse group of people, and I currently work in what is likely the only industry that is more complex and more heavily regulated than education, that's healthcare. As important as all that may be, what may be more important is being able to make a difference in the life of the child, whether that be through building homes in Mexico or volunteering through youth organizations or actually serving as a big brother in the Big Brothers, Little Brothers program. Through all of this, I have learned the value of real-time public service. And in closing, I'd like to thank the moderator, the PTA, my fellow candidates, and most of all, you in the audience who've taken time out of your Sunday to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Pat Phelps.
We live in a community with high expectations. We must ensure that the educational needs of not only our K-12 students, but preschoolers and adult ed are met and sustained. During tough times of budget cuts and declining enrollment, not only did our district survive, we thrived. Our high schools remain nationally ranked. We continue to produce Blue Ribbon and California Distinguished Schools. We offered new courses, supported activities in academics, the arts, and sports. We maintained safe and secure campuses. These things did not happen by accident. They happened because we had a team. This team is comprised not only of the board, administrators, and teachers, but also parents, counselors, and classified staff. Anyone who believes differently cannot have been involved in our district. My years on the board have demonstrated my commitment to our schools and our children. I am proud to serve in a district where every child matters. I hope to continue my service and pledge to remain an advocate for our district and every child in it.
Thank you. Mr. Bill Gorbach.
I've been there to help schools hear parent concerns, explain and implement programs and policy in the best way for students, parents, and the whole school community. I've been there to facilitate conflict resolution between disputing students or between parents and school personnel and help parties find consensus. I can help find consensus among the board with the board and community. As an educational leader, former president of the California School Counseling Association, I've been there researching best practices in education to bring to the board for discussion and ways to implement them in the classroom to benefit students' education. I have worked closely with school administration to implement budget decisions in the most cost-effective way for students and teachers. Because of my experience serving students and parents, I will never lose sight of the fact that the students, parents, and school staffs are our constituency. I ask for your vote.
Thank you. Mr. David Fox.
I'm not running because I have political ambition. I'm not running because I have a score to settle. I'm certainly not running to get rich. I'm running because I have a burning desire to be of service to the community, and I've already proven that my background and skills allow me to do this. Our district needs and deserves an accountable, highly qualified, and independent board. People ask me, how will you do this? I smile when I hear this because I've effected organizational transformation many times before. I started a company with 4 people in a rented office that went on to manage tens of billions of dollars. I've been asked to take over departments that management had given up on. Poor production, non-existent morale, you name it. Once I was told I had permission to clean house, fire everybody, and start over. I didn't fire anybody, and within a year we were a top 10th percentile performer, not just in the company, but in the marketplace. I know how to transform organizations and get things done by working with people, and I relish the opportunity to do this for our community. As I've said, the choice before our community in this election cannot be more clear. Do you want a board that provides nothing but an automatic yes vote, or do you want more? We are a community of high achievers, and we deserve a board that embodies these values. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Mr. Mike Dunn.
Well, I want to give some good news. We have a very, very good school district. We have some of the best teachers in the United States of America. But like I mentioned before, our enrollment has declined 10% for the last 6 years. Every year we've seen a decline in enrollment. The customers are telling us something. They're saying we can do better. Now, about 97% of the time, the board votes 5-0 on a particular issue, but that 3% of the time that it doesn't is significant. For example, I voted against the closure of University and Meadows. I voted for the 2 charter schools, and I was one of the people who was responsible. Well, let me just be blunt. Mark McLaughlin would not be the assistant superintendent in charge of this. Mark McLaughlin would not be the assistant superintendent in charge of personnel if I hadn't lobbied for him. We need at least one more independent on this board so I can get a second on my action items.
Thank you. Mr. Tony Doltz.
The schools are required to collect an ever-increasing amount of personal data from our students in exchange for the funding mechanism mainly coming from the federal government. You could say our schools are selling our children's data in exchange for funding. Our children are in imminent danger and requires our immediate attention. Fortunately, in California, we have rights that they don't have in other states. We have the right to opt out of assessments, surveys, and inappropriate questions. Otherwise, your children's data will be collected from the time they're at kindergarten to the 12th grade, and you don't know where that data is going to show up at some point in time, no government or private company can guarantee the security of data. The only safe data is data we do not surrender.
Thank you. Mr. John Anderson.
Thank you to the PTA for hosting today's event. Thank you to each of you for coming out. And I also want to say thank you to the teachers and staff of the past couple of decades who helped provide a wonderful education for my children. They've all graduated from California colleges and are doing very well. So thank you to the teachers and staff that made that possible. But we can't rest on our laurels. We need to continue moving forward, and what are the next steps that will help our district continue moving forward? Number one, no school closures. We made a terrible mistake by closing Meadows and University, and we do not need to repeat that type of mistake. And how do we do that? We do that by enhancing programs. We talked about IB and the Capstone program, fantastic opportunities, but we need to look at why was Earth's a success? Why is MATES a success? And how can we replicate those activities here to keep parents in our district and keep us moving forward? Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank the school board candidates in the audience for coming to today's forum, and especially for everyone's respectful civil discourse. It's very impressive to see a community like this. Please be sure to vote on November the 4th, and the forum is now adjourned. Thanks.